I heard the chandelier before I heard her voice, a faint, nervous clink above the table, just as my mother leaned in and said, "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay long." Forks hovered midair. My sister's lips curved into a satisfied little smile. My brother kept circling his scotch, eyes fixed on the amber like the sentence hadn't landed in the room at all. Heat rushed to my face, sharp and immediate, but my hand didn't shake when I lifted my glass. I smiled, took a careful sip, pushed my chair back, and stood. No one asked where I was going. No one bothered to look up. But 2 weeks later, every single one of them would. Before I go on, I need to know something. If you've ever heard words like that said softly across a table, meant to shrink you without making a scene, then stay with me, because it didn't end the way they expected. Hello, I'm Lotus in the story above. When I was a child, the cabin at Lake Marlowe was the only place I felt solid instead of transparent. My grandfather used to wake me before dawn and walk me down to the dock while the world was still quiet. The lake stretched out like polished silver, waiting for sunlight. He'd place the fishing rod in my hands, his grip steady over mine, the air smelling of wet pine and cold water. At night, we sat by the fire, my fingers sticky from burnt marshmallows, the cedar chest beside us holding the deed he always called ours. One evening, he looked at me and said, "This will be yours to protect someday." I held on to that sentence like it was a vow. After he passed, the cabin changed without ever moving an inch. My parents slowly absorbed it into what they started calling the family place, even though the title never left my name. Trips were planned in group chats I wasn't part of. Invitations arrived only after everything was booked and decided. Photos from those weekends began appearing around the house. My brother standing on the dock, pretending he'd caught something enormous. My sister wrapped in a blanket on the porch, smiling softly. My parents beaming like they'd built the cabin with their own hands. I wasn't in a single frame. I learned early that attention in my family wasn't shared, it was distributed. My brother was the success story, my sister was the favorite, and I was the useful one. When I made honor roll, no one attended the ceremony. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for community college, my mother mentioned me in conversations as a warning, make better choices than Lotus. It was never shouted, never openly cruel, just a quiet, constant assignment of my place. The night there wasn't a seat for me at dinner. The birthday only my grandfather remembered. The phone call from a teacher about a scholarship, followed by my parents saying, "We didn't know she applied." One summer, I tried to say something. They were planning another weekend at the cabin, and I spoke up, softly. "I'd like to come too." My mother didn't look up from her list. "All the rooms are taken," she said. "Maybe next year." My brother laughed under his breath. My sister kept scrolling. I stood there holding grocery bags they'd asked me to pick up, lantern fuel and snacks. No one noticed when I set them down and walked out. Looking back, that was the moment I understood the silence they expected from me and how to live inside it without disappearing completely. 2 nights after the dinner party, my phone lit up on the counter while I rinsed out a mug. The family group chat. Photos, plans, long threads I hadn't opened in months. I dried my hands and glanced at the preview. They were planning the annual summer trip to the cabin. My brother sent a photo of a new grill. My sister suggested matching shirts for porch pictures. My mother typed long messages about rooms, groceries, seating. My name didn't appear once, not as a guest, not even as an afterthought. It felt like watching a play where I'd been erased from the script but left listed at the bottom for formality. I tapped the screen and scrolled. "All the rooms are taken. Lotus doesn't usually come anyway. We'll use her key if she forgets to drop it off." Her key, as if it belonged to them, as if I didn't. At the top of the screen, a small envelope icon appeared. A bank email. I opened it without thinking. It referenced a joint account I didn't remember authorizing. My name sat beside my mother's, bolded. At the bottom, a note about automatic property tax payments linked to my profile. For the cabin, payments I hadn't approved. The kitchen suddenly felt too quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened. I wasn't just excluded, I wasn't just overlooked, I was useful when paperwork needed a responsible name. I set the phone face down on the table. Messages continued to buzz against the wood, vibrating like something trying to pull me back in. I didn't answer. I sat by the window, knees pulled in, watching city lights reflect faintly against the glass. Towels hung unevenly. Mail leaned against a fruit bowl. Everything looked suspended, waiting. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, something had settled. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. I smiled, small and quiet, the kind of smile no one in that group chat would ever notice, but they would soon. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. The apartment was dim, washed in soft gray light. I tied my hair back, walked barefoot into the kitchen, and started the coffee. Its slow drip filled the room. I sat at the table marked with years of scratches and rings, opened my notebook, and turned to a blank page. The pen felt heavier, but the words came clean. Sell the cabin, close joint accounts, call lawyer about estate. 3 lines, simple, steady. I pulled open the filing cabinet. It groaned like always. Inside were years of documents I never threw away. Near the back, wrapped carefully, was the deed. The paper was yellowed, faintly smelling of cedar. I laid it flat and smoothed it with my hand. At 7:14 a.m., I called Dan. He answered groggy. "I need to sell the cabin," I said. There was a pause. "The one at Lake Marlowe?" I confirmed. He hesitated again when I said my parents used it. "They don't own it," I added. Another pause. Then, quietly, "Send me everything." I scanned the documents, sent them over, then moved to the bank portal. Accounts, names, dates, auto payments. Some went back years. Close, remove, disable. Each click sounded like something falling into place. I made notes, ticking off confirmations one by one in my notebook. At one point, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Mom's planning the trip. Are you coming or not?" I let the message fade from the screen without opening it. By noon, I had closed 4 accounts, removed myself from 3 others, and canceled every automatic payment tied to my name. The silence in the apartment felt different now, not empty, but intentional, controlled. Next, I drafted an email to Harris, my parents' estate lawyer. I kept it brief, formal. "Hello, I'd like to review all documents related to the family estate and ensure my rights are properly represented. Please advise on available dates. Regards, Lotus." I read it twice, then hit send. Another buzz from my phone, this time a voicemail alert. Probably my mother, though she hadn't called me directly in weeks. I didn't listen to it, not yet. Instead, I cleaned the table, stacking the papers into a single, organized pile. I slid them into a folder and placed them on the counter. The apartment felt sharper now, like the edges of things had come into focus. The plan wasn't emotional, it wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. It was procedural, exact, unmistakably mine. Around 3, Dan texted, "Got the deed, everything checks out, starting the listing quietly, we'll send updates as offers come in." I replied with a simple thank you. As the afternoon faded into early evening, I sat by the window with a fresh cup of coffee. The city moved below me, cars, voices, wind pushing against the glass. I watched it all with a stillness I hadn't felt in years. They had spent so long treating me like a name they could use, a space they could fill, a signature they could borrow. I had played along. I had stayed quiet. But this time, the silence belonged to me. I closed my notebook, set my pen on top of it, and took one slow, steady breath. This time, I wouldn't fix what they'd broken. 2 weeks passed before anything happened, long enough for the silence to settle into my apartment like a second layer of paint. I worked, cooked simple meals, answered emails, and watched the city move outside my window. Nothing dramatic, just time passing the way it always does, quietly, until something breaks. The first crack came early one morning. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with a message from Dan. Offer came in. Cash buyer, closing soon. Funds will transfer directly to your account. I read the words twice, not out of disbelief, but because they felt strangely distant, like reading about someone else's life. I texted back one word, approved, and set the phone aside. By noon, the cabin was gone. I didn't tell anyone, but they found out anyway. That evening, my sister sent a string of messages to the family group chat. They came in fast, like she was typing while pacing. Did someone change the lock code at the cabin? Mom's freaking out. Dad says the realtor's sign wasn't there last week. Lotus, what did you do? I didn't open the thread. I just watched the previews stack on my lock screen, each one more frantic than the last. An hour later, my mother called 3 times. Then she switched to voicemail. Lotus, this is not funny. Call me back immediately. Then another, you had no right. This isn't just your decision. Call me now. And another, voice cracking, Lotus, please, you're scaring me. Call me back. I didn't. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the voicemail counter climb like a timer. For the first time, their panic wasn't something they could hide behind polite words or controlled tones. It was raw, uneven, honest. Then came the bank statements. My mother texted a photo, blurry, tilted, but I could still make out the red notifications. Joint account closed, credit line suspended, property tax autopay failed, secondary signature removed. She didn't send a message with the photo. She didn't need to. The image said everything. Within minutes, my brother called. Then again, then again. I let each ring fade into the room like a distant alarm. Finally, he sent a single message. What the hell is going on? I put the phone face down, the vibration rattling lightly against the wood. The apartment felt smaller, tighter, like the air had thickened. The city outside seemed muted, as if waiting to see what I'd do next. Then came the moment I'd been expecting, a soft thud outside my door, a pause, then the buzzer. I pressed the intercom. It's Dad. Open up. His voice carried none of the command I grew up with. It sounded strange, something between anger and uncertainty. I buzzed him in and stepped back, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. The door opened hard, hitting the stop with a sharp click. My father stood there, breath heavy, face flushed. He looked around the apartment, slowly taking in the mismatched furniture, the tiny kitchen, the papers stacked neatly on the table. Is it true? He asked. Did you sell the cabin? I kept my voice even. Yes. You closed the accounts? Removed your name from everything? Yes. His jaw tightened. Do you understand what you've done? I nodded once, completely. He exhaled long and shaky, like someone realizing a door had been shut from the other side. All right, he said quietly, you've made your point. I straightened. No, I haven't. Not yet. He looked at me, then really looked, and in that moment the balance shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, undeniable tilt. A small envelope sat on the counter beside me. Dan's letter. I slid it toward him. A lawyer's letter is on its way, I said. You should read it. His expression didn't break, but something in his posture folded like a structure losing a support beam. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He just turned, opened the door, and walked out. And for the first time in years, the silence he left behind felt like mine. The morning after my father left the apartment felt unusually bright. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains in quiet, slanted lines, landing on the table where the last of the paperwork still sat in a neat stack. The room was still, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft drip of the coffee maker finishing its cycle. I moved slowly, almost carefully, as if the air had a new weight to it. I poured coffee into my chipped mug, wrapped both hands around it, and stood by the window. The city moved below, cars merging, people crossing streets, a dog tugging its owner toward the park. Ordinary things, steady things, things that didn't need my permission or my presence. My phone buzzed on the counter. A preview message appeared. Mom wants to apologize. Can we talk? Another, we didn't know things were this bad. Please answer. I didn't touch the phone. I let the screen dim on its own, the apartment returning to its soft quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, tracing the rim of my mug with one finger. The folder of documents was closed now, the deed to the cabin no longer mine, the accounts detached from my name, the legal letter already moving through the system. These things weren't symbols anymore. They were decisions, finished ones. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel suspended between obligation and resentment. I felt grounded, like someone standing on their own porch after a storm, hearing the world breathe again. A flicker of memory came back. The cabin at dusk, the lake turning copper as the sun dropped behind the trees. My grandfather's voice, low and steady, telling me to protect what was mine. I'd tried to honor that for years. In the end, protecting it didn't mean holding on to it. It meant releasing the place where I'd once belonged, but no longer did. I closed my eyes for a moment and inhaled slowly. The air smelled like coffee, old wood, and morning light warming the floor. When I opened my eyes again, everything felt clear. Not lighter, not heavier, just honest. The silence in the room wasn't the kind they forced on me. It was the kind I chose. I didn't cut them off. I just stopped signing my name under their chaos. Some endings don't slam shut. They settle like dust after a long breath, like a door easing closed on its own. And if you've ever reclaimed your quiet, even once, you know the sound it makes. It isn't loud, it isn't angry, it's the soft click of a life finally belonging to you. If you've lived through something like this, let your voice be heard. Share what stayed silent the longest. Your story might be the reminder someone else needs to choose themselves.